It's a good thing. Ready to go? Yeah? Shalom Aleichem. Hello, Ella. Welcome. Yeah? We're continuing the letter Mem in Kapitel Kuf Yotes in Psalm 119. Today we'll attempt to learn verses 101 and 102. So in the previous verses there was a lot of emphasis on wisdom. In verse 98 we talked about the verb was Tichakmeni, to make me wise. In verse 99 it was Hiskalti, to become more knowledgeable. In verse 100 the verse talked about contemplation as Bainan. Verses 101 and 102 focus largely on pathways, roadmaps, staying the course. Verse 101 begins with a metaphor of an oirach. An oirach is a path. And David HaMelech says, Mikol oirach ra, from all bad pathways, kolisi ragloi, I restrained my feet. Leman eshmer dvarecha, so that I might keep your words. In verse 102, the psalm continues now, Mi mishpatecha loy sarti, I did not turn away from your judgment. And the notion of turning away in Torah literature often invokes the metaphor of a path. As we know, with regard to the sin of the golden calf, it says, Maher soru min haderech, how quickly they turned off the path. And the reason that David HaMelech is loy sarti, he doesn't turn away, is because ki ata horisani, because you instructed or taught or showed me the way. Okay? So what does this mean? What does it mean when David HaMelech says, Mikol oirach ra kol lisei ragli? What does it mean from all bad pathways he restrained his feet? So our first point of departure will be Rashi. Rashi says, Monati, I restrained or withheld. And he says, if you want to understand this word in Psalms, in the book of Tehillim, then you need to look in the book of Shmuel, the prophecies of Samuel. In the 25th chapter of the first book, David HaMelech has an encounter with a woman whose name is Avigail. Later she's widowed and David HaMelech marries her. But he says to Avigail, he says he's grateful to her. And David says to Avigail, blessed are you to Hashem. He says, Kilisini hayoim hazeh mivoy bedamim. You have restrained me today from coming into a path of bloodletting or violence. So I think that the reason that Rashi here in Tehillim sends us off to the book of Shmuel is to tell us that the restraining is not to be understood in the physical or material sense. This is not a literal thing. He's trying to demonstrate that even though restraint oftentimes speaks to force, holding back, like literally kind of using material or brute force to guide something or to hold something, here it refers more to an influence. It's more like what we call a restraint that comes from the nefesh. Just as Avigail did not physically hold David HaMelech back from anything, she influenced him in a positive way, and David HaMelech was grateful for that influence, and he blessed her for it. He says, Kilisini hayoim hazeh, you have held me back, you have restrained me on this day. So Rashi says that kilisini is the same kol isi ragloi. David HaMelech says, I restrained from walking in the wrong place. What restrained me, or why did I restrain myself? Why did I rein myself in? Leman eshmer dvarecha, so that I might keep your words. So from here, we're going to take a look now in the Mitzudas David. Mitzudas David says the following. He says, first of all, kolisi is manati. It means to restrain. And he uses a different cross-reference. He says, "K'may vayikole hagoshem," the rain was restrained.
This is Chaf Lamed A.
This is Chaf Lamed Aleph,
This is Chaf Lamed
and this is also Chaf Lamed Aleph.
Kala, Nigmar, it's
Vayikole hageshem is with a Aleph.
Oh, in Atit, yeah.
Vayikole hageshem. So again, there seems to be the rain stopped. The rain was restrained. Again, the same kind of thing. It seems to be emphasizing the notion this is not a physical restraint. This is when a person restrains themselves, like a person controls themselves. So the Metzudas David says that kol isi ragli means monati ragli milaleches b'derech ra. Restraining of feet is not a physical thing. Restraining of feet is that if a person could follow a certain path and he restrains himself from following that path, he doesn't walk down that path. I'm not going to go there. Like people sometimes use the expression, I won't even go there. But they're not going anywhere. It's just a euphemism. It's an expression. This is all euphemistic. This is not to be understood literally. Mikol oirach ra kolisi ragloi. From bad paths, I have restrained my feet. David HaMelech says, I restrain myself from going in an inappropriate path, and what he calls a bad path. And why did he do it? L'man eshmer dvarecha. So that he might keep your words. Now, most of us, if we believe that something was bad for us, we would restrain ourselves from following the path. And I'll give you an example of something that everybody can relate to. Food is a very important part of life. If you don't eat, you will die. If you eat too much, you will also die. In today's day and age, perhaps for the first time in history, more people are dying from eating too much than from eating too little. And not only are we dying from eating too much, but we're dying from eating the wrong food. Why do people eat the wrong food? I'll give you a multiple choice. A, because it tastes terrible. B, because it tastes delicious. C, because it looks like it tastes delicious. So it's definitely not A because it tastes terrible, right? It's going to be B and C. Either it tastes delicious or it looks delicious. So that's why we're eating this food, which is actually really bad for us. So if somebody were to find the strength to restrain themselves, why would they do that? Why wouldn't you stuff your face? Why wouldn't you eat that which is sweet and sugary and fatty? Because it tastes bad? Because you know it's bad for you. Because you know it's bad for you, you have something called self-control. You're able to discipline yourself. You restrain yourself. I'm not going to do something which is bad for me because it's bad for me. And there are a million examples of this. So David HaMelech says, Mikol oirach ra kolise ragli. I have restrained myself from walking down bad paths. Essentially, all he just said is he's a disciplined fellow. We all do that. We all avoid paths we think are bad for us. We restrain ourselves. Most of these paths, they beckon to us. They're enticing. They're even intoxicating. They look so good. We restrain ourselves. We don't do that. Sometimes it could be losing your temper. Sometimes it gets being drawn into a conversation with somebody who you know is toxic for you. And you've been down that path once, and twice, and a third time, and you said, no. I'm not going down that path anymore. I know they're going to try to get me to go. I'm not going there. Why? It's bad for me. A person who's smart sees the next step. You have to be a chess player in life. You can't only look at the first moment, the next moment of gratification. It looks good. It won't end well. I've been down this road already. So I'm going to self-discipline. So what did David HaMelech tell us? Fantastic. I'm so proud. David HaMelech was a man of discipline. Great. What does it tell me? In any way, would anybody disagree that if something is bad for you, that you should go down that path? It's bad for you? Go for it. Why? It's bad for me. It's an oirach ra. It's a bad path. But David HaMelech adds a word. He says, lema'an. Lema'an means because or in order. Lema'an eshmer dvarecha. And here the Metzudas David says, I restrain myself from going b'derech ra, but v'lei miyiras habriyos, not because I was afraid of people or afraid of what they might say. So often people will do things because of what people will say or people won't say. Peer pressure, wanting to keep up with the Jones, following the rat race, being like everybody else, not having the courage of being able to do what you believe because somebody might say something. So no, that's not why David HaMelech, it's not what he's talking about here. There are lots of people who restrain themselves from doing pathways that they think are bad because miyiras habrius, because they're timid, because they're afraid. Ki'im, rather, leman eshmer dvarecha, because you said it was no good. His harta olav, you said it was no good. In other words, David HaMelech is telling us, I avoided a path that's bad. Why? Because I trusted if Hashem said it's bad for me, then it must be bad for me. In other words, it's not an intuitive thing. This is not a person who's in control, who knows that things are bad, and because they'll be bad for me, I must avoid it. This is a person who's teaching us, avoid the path that's bad. Why? Because Hashem says it's bad. And Hashem, the Creator, knows us best. And if He says it's bad for us, and if He says it's not good, then we should avoid it. So now David HaMelech reveals not a disciplinarian side to himself or a self-control element. David HaMelech reveals an obedience to Hashem. This is an act of homage to the Creator. Mikol oirach ra, I avoided the bad path. Lema'an eshmer. But interestingly, it doesn't say lishmer, to keep. It says lema'an, so that I will keep. What does that mean? If it's a bad path, Hashem said don't do it, so that's already Leman Yishmar or Kedesha Eshmar. What is Lema'an Eshmar? So that I will keep. So Rabbeinu David Kimchi, the Radak, says like this. He says, he augments, he changes the words. He says, Loi ba'avur yirasi mibnei adam. Not because I'm afraid of people, not because I lack courage or I don't want to be different, or shala yaviuni ra b'shvil hamaisa, because it won't end up being bad for me. But in order to be able to keep your words. In order to be able to keep your words. And you have the Ibn Ezra saying something very simple. Not ba'avur pachdi mira, because I'm afraid of evil, but it's all about keeping your words. Okay, so if it's all about keeping his words, and Leman Eshmer said I will keep his words, what was this bad path that I had to avoid? Leman Eshmer, so that I will keep the proper path. So in order to explain what the Rishonim are saying here, I think you have to go to another Rishon, to the Rebbe of the Abarbanel, Rabbeinu Yitzchak Chiyun. And he says, we're going to go to Rabbeinu Yitzchak Chiyun in a minute. First we're going to stop, not in Portugal, but first we're going to stop in northern Israel. We're going to stop in Tzfat, a man who came from Spain. His name was Rabbeinu Shmuel Azido. Rabbeinu Shmuel Azido wrote a very famous compilation, which is more like an anthology, on Pirkei Avot called Medrash Shmuel. And he also wrote commentary on Tehillim. So he says the following. He says, David HaMelech does not speak about doing things which are actually bad. It's a given. It's called a tzaddik. Of course he didn't do anything as bad. But the pasuk says, Lema'an eshmar, so that I will keep your words. And therefore, Reb Shmuel says that David HaMelech was wise enough to understand that going in certain pathways would be inappropriate. Not a direct contravention of Hashem's word, but not appropriate for a Torah Jew. And because going in a certain pathway would not be appropriate for a Torah Jew, David HaMelech avoided it. And he says by avoiding a pathway which is inappropriate, it's kal v'chomer, how much more so, he didn't actually violate the will of Hashem. So what could this be? What could this be? It's a pathway which is not appropriate, but it's not actually something which is a direct contravention, which is a direct violation of the mitzvah. What could this be? In the Sefer Tehillas Hashem, he says that a person should not put himself into a situation in which he or she will be tested. Even if you feel very secure that you know what's right, don't tempt yourself. And he says David HaMelech learned this the hard way. He asked Hashem, he prayed that he would be tested and tempted, and he was, and it did not end well. So David HaMelech, having learned the lesson of temptation, He says, Mikol oirach ra, from every bad pathway. What's every bad pathway? Temptation. He said, I restrained myself from temptation. I didn't put myself into a situation where I might be tempted. Leman eshmar, so then I know I will keep your ways. There's a beautiful story. I don't know if it's true. I mean, it's a story. It could be a parable. Maybe it's real. I think the Rebbe once even repeated this story. There was a fellow who was living in a shtetl. In a shtetl, a century or so ago, what could you do wrong in a shtetl? What could you do wrong? I mean, probably you could do things wrong anyway. People can sin anywhere, and the Yetzer Hara doesn't take a day off. But it's a shtetl. Everybody was Jewish. 95% of the people were Jewish there. A few Gentiles live in the outskirts. It was a shtetl that was soaked in Yiddishkeit. Not Fiddler on the Roof kind of Yiddishkeit. Real authentic. And a fellow lived there, and what did he do? He did his whatever work to eke out a living, and he studied Torah, and he did mitzvahs, and he lived with his friends, with his community. And he said to himself, Achochma, he said, this is a wisdom, to live in a shtetl, be a devout Jew. You almost have to fight with yourself and to do something wrong, he said. I'm going to leave this shtetl. He said, I want to be a warrior. I want to accomplish something in Avodas Hashem. I'm going to move to the big city. And in the big city, there's all kinds of temptations. It's a big city. There's high society. There's all kinds of things that beckon to the eye and tug at the heart, and I'll still be a devout Jew. And so he did that. He sold his house and his farm and his homestead, and he moved to the big city. Now, obviously, a Yid from a shtetl, where in the city did he live? In the Jewish neighborhood. So, after a year or so of living in a Jewish neighborhood and attending shul 3 times a day, he said to himself, Achochma, this is an achievement, to live in a Yiddish neighborhood and not to do anything wrong. I'm going to leave the Jewish neighborhood behind. I will have many, many kinds of neighbors. And there I will show everybody I can still be a devout Jew. And so he left behind the Jewish neighborhood, moved to a new neighborhood, a waspy neighborhood, what they would call in today's lexicon. And there he continued to serve Hashem and learn Torah, do mitzvahs. And he still maintained himself, his integrity of his Yiddishkeit. And then he said, Ach Chochma, I just live in the neighborhood. I have nothing to do with my neighbors. I need to start to go to the pubs and the cafes. I need to go to the shows and the ballet. And he said, and then I will still be a devout Jew. And the end of the story, he didn't maintain the integrity of his Yiddishkeit. And the point of the story is, you don't tempt yourself. Do not seek temptation. Life's hard enough. In fact, every morning we say, Al Tvienu Lidei Nisayon. I will tell you something that I don't claim to know the meaning of. I heard this from my Zaydi Alav Shalom. He told me that he heard as a boy growing up in Russia, in Cheder, that the Alter Rebbe once met Reb Nachman of Breslov, who was much younger than him. And they conversed, they connected. You're talking about giants, right? And later the Alter Rebbe was asked what he said about Reb Nachman. Reb Nachman was not so popular amongst other Hasidic leaders. They criticized him. There was a huge machlekes, a huge dispute. He had his own pathway. So he said, Alter Rebbe, unlike many of the other Hasidic masters who held him in contempt, the Alter Rebbe said, is a gibur chayil. He is a valiant warrior. That's about the highest compliment. Okay, he's a warrior in Avodas Hashem. But Alter Rebbe said, aber lässt sich rein in Nisyonis und das tarmanisht. He allows himself to be tempted, I presume then to overcome, and this is not appropriate. So the Alter Rebbe didn't agree with his path. I don't claim to know what that means. I don't know in what way Reb Nachman tempted himself. He was a saint of the highest order. He was a supreme tzaddik. I don't know what it means. But this is what, I heard this from Isaiah. We heard it from elder Chassidim of the last century. That's what the Alter Rebbe's comment was. So be that aside of what exactly it means, which I don't know what it means, the point is this. David HaMelech is teaching us, don't follow the path of temptation. Now go back to this pasuk. Now it sings off the page. Mikol oirach rakol ragloi. David HaMelech said, I avoided the path of temptation. That's any bad path. Mikol oirach ra. Why did he avoid all these paths? Leman eshmer. So that I can keep the straight and narrow. Because if you won't avoid these paths, maybe you won't be eshmer. maybe you won't keep. So avoid the path of temptation, because if you don't, you won't keep. We live in a sick world today, where if somebody avoids the path of temptation, he is tarred and feathered and labeled some kind of weirdo. The Vice President of the United States will not have lunch alone with another woman, so he's mocked in public. B'sach hakol, he says, I want to avoid temptation. But it's better to be a Bill Clinton. If you think about it, society is so twisted, so strange. People have to live on the edge at all times, tempting themselves to the nth degree, but, we don't do anything wrong. And if you don't tempt yourself, something's wrong with you. If you don't put yourself in a compromising position, what, you don't have any inner strength? I don't know if I have inner strength. Why would I bother finding out? Inner strength is something you find that if Hashem gives you an asoyin. Hashem gives tests. You don't look for tests. And as I said, every morning we say in our daily blessings, Al Tvienu, we beg Hashem, please don't bring me to the hands of a test. Not don't put me in a test. Even to the hands of a test. And that was wisdom that David HaMelech is imparting to us. The wisdom of his life. You know how you learn a lesson best? You first make a mistake. The Gemara says, Ein Adam Eimed al Dvar Halacha. You don't really know the halacha, the rule right, Ela Imkain, unless Nichshal Bay, unless you first stumbled in it. I can tell you from experience, you know which shilas I never answer wrong? The ones I answered wrong once. And then I had to deal with the shame of saying the wrong thing. When I stumbled, I never make a mistake. So this is the point that's being made to us in the idea of Leman Eshmer Dvarecha. And now let's go back to Portugal. Let's go back to Lisbon to learn Torah from the Abar Benel's teacher, Rabbeinu Yitzchak Chiyun. Rabbeinu Yitzchak says something amazing. When you read this pasuk, it all sounds negative. Oirach ra, a bad path. That's negative. Kolisi means restrain, hold back. Lema'an, in order, eshmar, so that the word eshmar comes from the Hebrew word shomer. What do you shomer from? What do you guard from? From something negative. Richiyun saw within this pasuk also an emphasis on the positive. He said David HaMelech was not only telling you don't violate Hashem's will, he was also telling you embrace the will of Hashem. Do the will of Hashem. He says, Leman Eshmer means Lishmer HaMitzvahs, to keep the mitzvahs, to do what Hashem wants, to fulfill the path of righteousness. And how does one fulfill the path of righteousness in truth? Said Richiyun, here he refers to the path of righteousness should not be avoided because of, I think it's bad. People say it's bad, but because Hashem says it's bad. And so too, the path of goodness I should follow, not because I think it's good, people will appreciate me for it, but rather because Hashem said to. And this, says Richiyun, is similar to the teaching of Antigonus found in the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, that says, Al tiyu ka'avodim hamishamshin es harav al menas lekabel pras. Do not be like servants who are engaged in the service of the master in order to receive a prize. Ella, rather, you should be ka'avodim hamishamshin, like servants who are engaged in the service. Why? Shalei al menas lekabel pras. And virtually all of the Rishonim, from Rambam to Rashi, as is anthologized in the Bartanura later, Mipnei, serve Hashem, Mipnei ha'ahava, serve Hashem because you love God. It should be a labor of love, not the seeking of reward and remuneration. And it's like an inverted way. David HaMelech says, I avoided evil and bad, not because it was bad for me. It is bad for you, by the way. A life of sin, in the end, swallows and devours the person. Nobody lives well on the path of sin. It comes from short-sightedness. It becomes to get caught up in the here and now. It becomes because you think this moment of pleasure is worth any kind of sacrifice, but it really isn't. And in the end, the bitter grapes are not rewarding. But nonetheless, people unfortunately make that mistake. The short-sightedness and forgetfulness that punctuates life oftentimes cause us to go down the wrong path. So David HaMelech is telling us, Leman Eshmer, do what's right, because it's right. Because God said it's right. But Richiyun said we can also learn from this verse Mikol oirech ra kol isur ragloi. Stay away from a bad path means stay away from a path that will lead you into disservice, into a lackadaisical lack of passion and fervor that won't inspire you to serve Hashem and do what's right. Why should you stay away from a path like that? Not because that path will be tempting to do something wrong, but even a path that will disable you from doing what's right is also something to be avoided. So you'll follow a path. It's a path of lethargy. It's a path of laziness. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just not going to do the right thing. I'm not going to fulfill the will of Hashem as I should. That's a problem. Hello? I hear you loud and clear, Zelda. Good morning to you and all of our listeners. No, it's a double portion this week, Zelda, outside of the land of Israel. We'll finally be catching up with our Israeli brethren, concluding the fourth book of the Torah. It's Shabbat Chazak, a Shabbat of strength. And do you know why it's a Shabbat of strength? I'm going to try to tell you. It's a Shabbat of strength because we, the Jewish people, are invariably counterintuitive when it comes to our way of life. Most people, when they come to the conclusion of something, will take a vacation. You worked hard, you managed to come to the end, you've earned it. Go on holiday now. Well, that's not the message anybody will be hearing in their synagogue this Shabbat. Whether you're in Israel or in Toronto or Tokyo, if you come to Shul this week, what you're going to hear is, you finished the fourth book of the Torah, that's great. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Then let us redouble our efforts and let us try even harder to utilize the time and the wherewithal and energy that God gives us to study His Torah, to learn right from wrong, and then to download that into our roadmap in real time. And to do as Hashem asks us to, in the best way we can. Life is a path, Zelda, and the path has many deviations, many sideways, and you have to avoid all those negative paths which will invariably take you into a situation of temptation or simply disable you from fulfilling your destiny in the fullest sense. Instead, travel what we call Derech HaMelech. Follow the King's Highway. Do what is right, follow the path of Torah, and when you finish or reach a milestone, use that as impetus and a catalyst to redouble one's efforts. And when you do that, Zelda, you fulfill the famous Torah maxim, Yelchu mechayel el choyel. We go from strength to strength. And that's what we have to try to do each and every day. I once heard from a wise person that all you have to do today to be successful is just do a little better than yesterday. And if every day we can do in our Yiddishkeit, in our service to Hashem, just a little better than yesterday, then we are going from strength to strength. We are traveling in the right direction, and I hope and pray that as a result of renewed efforts, as a result of us gathering our strength and pushing ourselves even harder, that we will not only continue on a path of goodness and righteousness, but that we will very, very soon find ourselves walking down the proverbial path to redemption that leads straight into the third Beit HaMikdash and a world that will be made whole and healed, a world that will be punctuated by nothing but happiness, fulfillment, and a acute sense of the presence of God. For when Mashiach will come, the whole world will be bathed in the knowledge and awareness of the Creator, like the ocean covers the ocean bed, as Isaiah metaphorizes. May that be speedily and in our days. Amen. All right, I think we kind of finished the point before, yes?
You merge this into your...
You have to merge it. We're on a pathway, right? All pathways merge.
Is anybody talking about the word kalam? Because kele is like J. It's a very strong word. Like, why use the word...
Kala could mean to destroy, right?
Like if you say kala.
Right, but here it means to restrain. That's very clear. That's what the commentaries say. All right, so let's sum up the first verse in some practical terms now. So here's a number of interesting practical things. When I was a boy, I heard that Hasidim used to say, what's the difference between those who are following the path of Hasidus and those who are just, observant, learn Torah, do mitzvahs? So there was a little ballad. This comes along with a little ballad. It's like lyrics to a song, to a Jewish Ukrainian song. And it goes something like this. The one who doesn't learn Hasidus says, that which you're allowed to do, you're allowed to do. Was men megmen. Was men tornit. And what you're not allowed to, megmen echabisela. You can have a little of that too. Don't overdo it. A little bit. But the Chassid says, what I'm not allowed to, I'm not allowed to. And what I'm allowed to, who says I need that? So this is the words really of Richiyun. Richiyun says, the path that we're talking about here is, who says you have to eat everything that's kosher? Who says that you have to indulge in every possible pleasure? Of course, kosher pleasures. Who says? Who says a person has to be indulgent? Who says a person has to live a life that's entirely generated by libido and self-sensual gratification and pleasure? Who says? Who says? Who says that should be the barometer of right and wrong? David HaMelech says it shouldn't be. Makol oirach, that's not even a good path. A path of self-indulgence is not a good path, even if it has the kosher symbol on it, even if you didn't actually violate the Torah. But a path, that's also an oirach ra, and therefore one should restrain themselves from it. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't violate the code of Jewish law. I didn't do anything which Hashem says I'm allowed to. L'ma'an eshmer. You want to follow that path of righteousness? You want to do everything I should do? Then don't do everything I want to do. You don't need everything. So that's one little like insight. And another insight that came to mind when I was preparing this class is a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. In the words of the Shema, it says, V'sartem, the word V'sartem means to turn aside, and we'll see that word shows up in the next verse. Turn off the path. V'sartem, V'avadtem elihim acherim, and you worship other gods. So you turn away from the path of serving Hashem, and you worship other gods. So the Baal Shem Tov asked, V'sartem, V'avadtem? Well, you turned away, and all of a sudden, immediately you were worshiping another God? Isn't there somewhere in between? I was focused on God, I turned away. And if you turn away, eventually you might turn in a way which is actually prohibited. Said the Baal Shem Tov, V'sartem, when the Yid turns away from Hashem, already V'avadtem. He's already worshiping a foreign master. In other words, the notion that in life there are some parav moments. It's not milchiks, it's not fleishiks. I'm using that euphemistically. There's gray areas. Gray. It's not right. It's not white. It's not wrong. It's not black. It's a gray area. It's not one way or the other. Well, can I just coast through life a little bit? I'll do mitzvahs tomorrow. Today I want a day off. Today I want to be in a gray zone. I don't want to do anything wrong, but I don't really want to do anything right either. It doesn't work that way, because Baal Shem Tov said, V'sartem v'avadtem. If you're not doing something right, invariably you're doing something wrong. That is the Yiddishkeit perspective. The Yiddishkeit perspective, which says every moment of life is a gift and an opportunity, and every moment has to be utilized 100%. We have to harness ourselves to the will of Hashem and use that moment in a positive way. And I think this is what David HaMelech means. When he says, Mikol oirech ra kol yisragle, if it's a bad path, I'm not turning off that, I'm not going onto it. I'm not going to follow anything. If it isn't good, then I'm not there. It's already an oirech ra. And he says, this is an order l'man eshmer, because I want to keep. And the I want to keep is not only futuristic, but ultimately that is invariably keeping. As it says, B'chol d'rachecha, in all of your ways, da'ehu, know him. How could that be possible? As the Mishnah says, Kol ma'asecha, all of the things you do. All of the things. Whether it's grooming, or eating, or sleeping, or a relationship and interaction, all of the things. L'shem shamayim. Have to be for the sake of heaven. So, on a practical takeaway now. What do we learn from this pasuk? I think we learn from this pasuk two very, very powerful things. Number one, there are no gray areas in life. What was that? It's like an awful book or something. Something Shades of Grey. Yeah.
50 Shades of Grey.
Okay, good. So then that makes my point for me. Nothing there is right, apparently. Shades of Grey are not good. End of story. That's not for a Yid. A Yid has to follow a path of righteousness. Ask yourself at every moment, is this right or not? If it's not, it's not. B'derech shalo, not for me. If it's not the right path, I should avoid it. And that's a very, very important concept, and sometimes it requires restraint. Because oftentimes the path of lack of righteousness will not be a conscious decision. It won't be say, okay, I'm going to sin now. What will it be instead? It will be just moving in that direction. You have to actively curb yourself from going on that path. You know, it's like every once in a while you have to bring your car to get serviced. And one of the things they do for you is something called wheel alignment. Because invariably, if you don't have a wheel alignment, your car starts pulling in a certain direction. Now, if you leave it out of hand, you're really in trouble. But even when it starts slightly to pull in a certain direction, it's not a good thing. We are always going to be pulling in a direction. That's part of being alive. Part of being alive is you have a nefesh habahamas, an animal soul, which is a pleasure-seeking animal. You have a yetzer hara, which is an actual force that tries to turn you away from the path of righteousness, and they take no days off. Your nefesh habahamas is always awake. Your yetzer hara is always active. So they're always pulling you. So you have to curb yourself. You have to restrain yourself. And this imparts the notion of constant restraint. A person has to live a life of restraint. The loose living is not healthy living. Kalisi Ragle. David HaMelech curbed himself. And a detail here, which I think we might not have highlighted till now, is Laman Eshmer. Why does he do it? Why does he do it? He does it Laman Eshmer. In other words, there is a very strong emphasis on intention. On intention. Even doing the right thing has to be done for the right reason. You should curb yourself. Not because it will look good. Not because it will be impressive on your resume. Not because you know yourself that it will be unhealthy for you. You should curb yourself, Laman Eshmer. The goal in life, the focus should be, I want to live the life Hashem wants me to live. And because it's Laman Eshmer, that's why Mikol Eirech Ra Kolisi. And do you know why that intention is so important? Because if you will not have that intention, you will never succeed at Kolisi Ragle. You'll never succeed at holding back. If it's bad for you, so the Yetzer Hara says, no, this is actually good for you. You say, people will say, who cares what people say? Or, why do you always have to be different? Once you get into an argument, other than, it's wrong because Hashem said it's wrong. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is that the best lie is the truth. People will ask me, so why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Instead of trying to rationalize and explain things, I just learn to say the truth. Because there's a code of Jewish laws, a Shulchan Aruch, I try to follow it. And the Shulchan Aruch doesn't approve of it. Because I'm a chassid of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe didn't want us to do that. What's wrong? Who said? Listen to me. I'm a chassid. That's the way a path I want to follow. You want to follow a different path? It's a free country, do as you please. I can't do something which is different than I've been taught. End of story. So that's what I'm going to do. Laman Eshmer. Because I want to do what's right. Because I want to do what's right, I'm going to follow this path, even though I cannot quote you chapter and verse of exactly what's wrong with this path. I know it's a Eirech Ra. If it's a Eirech Ra, I'm avoiding it. Really, one could argue that this little verse is a critical ingredient for success in life. Stay on the straight and narrow. Why? Because I want to keep. So I want to keep what I got. Because I value life. Because I want to fulfill my destiny. I want to fulfill my mission and purpose. Because Laman Eshmer. And Laman Eshmer will not happen by itself. Now we go from Pasuk Kuf Aleph into Pasuk Kuf Beis. But before we do that, I want to share two things with you. So first of all, very interestingly, much of what I said to you about the idea of temptation and so on and so forth actually shows up in the Sefarno. The Sefarno, when he taught this pasuk, he said that the Oirach Ra, the bad path, is Hirhure Avera, the thought of sin, entertaining sin. And he says, if you entertain sin, then you will sin. Simple as that. How do we know this? It's actually a pasuk. It's a pasuk in the Torah. It says, "V'lo sosuru achre levavchem ba'achre einechem." Do not follow your heart and your eyes. So, I've heard that in certain faith systems, as long as you don't do anything wrong, it doesn't matter if you think about it. And that's maybe somebody else's theology. But we should know, as a matter of fact, that in Torah theology, to ruminate on sin, or to think about sin, or to entertain sin, is also wrong. That's an oirach ra. That's a bad path. Entertaining sin, having inappropriate thoughts, having inappropriate lusts, is necessarily going to lead us in a bad place. So, well, I just thought about it. Can I enjoy myself in theory?
No, machshava midei ma'aseh.
The machshava contributes to Maisa, 100%, 100%, and that's the Leman Eshmer. That's what the Sepharno said. Now, here's something really interesting. Rabbeinu Menachem Meiri, another one of the great Rishonim, he says that the idea of oirach ra also includes with it a bad environment, bad friends. In the very first Psalm, King David says that he avoids Moishav Leitzim. Moishav Leitzim literally is a group, a band of mockers or scoffers, people who make a joke out of everything, who don't take life seriously, who find everything to laugh at when it comes to paths of holiness or righteousness. And by making a mockery and denigrating holiness, invariably, it seems a little easier to do things that are wrong, because things that are right are a joke anyway. So to demean or to denigrate, to mock and to scoff and to laugh, that's a Moishav Leitzim. And Rabbeinu Menachem Meiri says that Kolisi Ragli, curbing one's feet, this means from that Moishav Leitzim. And he says to stay away from that kind of Moishav Leitzim ensures that you won't learn from them. I didn't do anything. Yeah, I know. If that's who you hang out with, eventually you will. So we have another example of something which is not technically wrong, it doesn't actually violate anything, but it will lead us in a bad way. It's a bad path. Avoid it. And here the Meiri says something very interesting. He says that shleimot hamidot, having wellness, a balance in life, right? Having emotional balance. This comes, koidem bizman, comes before shleimot hanefesh, comes before perfecting oneself. So we exist really in two worlds, in two dimensions. There's the way we relate to others, the way we are socially active, and then there's the way we think for ourselves, our own self-consciousness. In the language of Kabbalah, this is the concept of moichin, mind, and midas. Midas are literally measures, but the measures through which I relate emotionally, how I relate. A measure is how I relate. We all live lives in which we relate to others. We have relationships. We are socially active people. We need a social circle. And at the same time, we have to be able to think for ourselves and not simply follow the crowd. You have to be a person. The Kotzker Rebbe once said, if I am I because you are you, then I'm not I and you're not you. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. What is he saying? He's saying, if I find myself dialectically, right? A dialect is the way people speak, the way people look at things. If I am I, I'm important because you think I'm important. I'm good because you think I'm good, or I'm whatever it may be because of how I'm viewed by others. The way my measure, my yardstick of self-value is how many likes did I get on Facebook? Do other people like me? Oh, if they like me, I must be good. So then if I am I, because you are you, you're a you, and you need to like. And if you didn't like, I didn't earn the likes. I got to do something to earn likes. So if I define my life by likes, or define my life by what others think, or what others approve of, I'm not I, and you're not you. Everything is skewed. But if I'm I, because I'm I am who I am. I know my shortcomings, I know my virtues, I know what I want out of life, and I'm going to find a way to get it. And you're you because I respect you as another person. So after I'm I, there's a you. And you and I have to find a way to get along. Because God put us on the same planet together. Because we occupy a similar space. Because I can make the best, bring out the best from you, and maybe you can bring the best out of me. So I'm I, because I'm I. You're you, because you're you. Now we can talk. Then I'm I and you're you. So it sounds ridiculous, but it's actually extremely profound. Extremely profound concept. So this idea that the Kotzker said, this is actually what the Meiri is saying over here when he says, Shleimus Hamidos, that my interaction with others has to be worked on, he says, before you perfect yourself. So even though I am I and you are you and all that stuff, but he says perfecting your midas, how you relate with others, comes even before perfecting yourself. Which is a little counterintuitive, right? Because if I am I because you are I am I and you're you because you are you, first I'll be I and you'll be you, and then after I'm finished being I and you're finished being you, then we can see how to get along. No, he says. Where do we see this? In a very literal way. As I shared with you many times, there used to be a day of wailing. Day of wailing. When is the day of wailing? The first day of nursery school. Here in this building, the first day of nursery school, all the halls were filled with wailing children. Why? Because they discovered for the first time in their lives they are not the center of the universe. They do have a father and mother who revolve around them, or a nanny who's there to give them every little need, or older brothers and sisters who dote on them. Now they ended up in the room for the first time in their life with 19 other brats, each of one who thinks that he or she is the center of the universe, or so they've been told for the last 3 years. And they found out that there's a problem with this thesis. It doesn't add up. So they're unhappy. And to make matters worse, if there's 19 kids in the class, there are not 19 fire trucks and 19 dollhouses. And they have to learn how to share. Second day of nursery, it's a little less. The wailing is going down. It's not so bad anymore. By the time a week is over, they finish sitting shiva for their own ego. And now, all of a sudden, they said, oh, it's not bad. We're starting to enjoy this. And then a few weeks later, they don't want to go home with their parents anymore. Now they want to stay. What's the first thing they learned? They learned social wellness. They learned how to get along with other people. The first thing you learn in nursery school is not your ABCs. A teacher who thinks that that's what nursery school is about should not be teaching in nursery school. The first thing that a child should learn is how to get along. You know what the first thing, more important than anything else, or whether you are very wise or very learned or very educated, very capable or very skillful, the first thing is, are you a mensch? Do you have midas tevis? You're looking for a shidduch. What's the first thing you want to know about the other person? How do they relate to other people? Are they a mensch? Are they a nice person? They have midas tevis? Or are they mean and selfish? This is the first thing people want to know. Meiri says that comes first. Why is he saying this? So I'll tell you why I think. Because I think, it seems to me that verse 101 speaks primarily about emotional wellness, about engaging, knowing when to restrain, which is part of interaction. Part of interaction is not only to engage, but also to know when to pull back. Rachmana litzlan, a person who is not well, doesn't have the normal emotional tools to interact, to relate, a condition which is called autism, but then there's a whole spectrum, are people who don't know not only how to engage, sometimes more importantly, they don't know when to pull back. So they don't know that there's certain times when it's inappropriate to laugh or yell and scream now, or to cry, or it's not appropriate now. They don't know how to live in their surroundings. They're not capable of understanding their surroundings. They're not bad, they're beautiful souls. They're not gifted with that ability. They don't have that aptitude. So some of them are brilliant. Some autistic people are geniuses. And they can be harnessed and guided and used right. They can make amazing contributions to society. Just don't expect them to have a normal relationship. And know before you come in that something's wrong here. So whether it's something like Asperger's or various conditions in which people are unable to relate, that's a lack of restraint. So this is this business of, I have to know who to avoid. I avoid bad company, like the Sefarno says. I know that I have to, I'm probably like the Meiri says, Maishav Leitzim. I know which pathways I don't want to be in. It's about environment, like the Sefarno says. This is about an emotional sense of balance. From there, we go on to verse 101, we go on to verse 102, which speaks about judgment. Judgment comes from where? Not from the heart, but that's supposed to be a cerebral thing. What's right and what's wrong. That is supposed to take some brains.
It's not another word also for chukim, from a mitzvot? Not chukim.
It is a word for mitzvot. Mishpatecha is a word for mitzvot, one of the forms of mitzvot. But some of the three words which refer to mitzvot recurring in Psalm 119. We have Edotecha or Edvotecha. We have Chukecha constantly. And we have Mishpatecha. So it's all about learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. But different words. David HaMelech constantly changes, right? Mitzvasecha, Edotecha, Chukecha, Mishpatecha. Keeps going back and forth. That's how this goes. So it would seem to me that what the Meiri is alluding to when he says first you learn Shleimus HaMidos and then afterwards comes Shleimus HaNefesh. Nefesh is usually understood to be the seichel, the cerebral thing. Like it says, the Alter Rebbe writes, when you're supposed to have him out when you're putting on tefillin, he says that you put on the tefillin of the hand in order to rein in the Yetzer Haras in the heart, and in order to guide the mind, the seichel, he says the nefesh ha-seichel is the nefesh which is in the mind. So it's from heart to mind. I think that's what the Meiri means, as you'll see. So from verse 101, we go into verse 102, which is, Mi mishpatecha lo sarti. I did not turn away from your judgments. Hashem's judgments. Why? Ki ata harisani. Because you taught me. All right. Mitzudas David says, Loi sarti. Mi mishpatecha loi sarti. From your judgments, I didn't turn aside. So you ask the question, why mishpatecha? So Mitzudas David says like this. What he means to say is, shafatati din emet. David HaMelech laid down the ruling, the right ruling. He gave the right verdict. He was always asked questions. He gave the verdict. Why did he give the right verdict? Ki ata l'madetani. Because you taught me. Lebale kashal b'davar, so that I would not stumble. That sometimes things seem confusing, and sometimes they're not clear, and sometimes it's not obvious. But you taught me, and because you taught me, I didn't stumble, and I made the right decisions. As Mitzudas says, Harisane is inyan limud, it means to learn. Rabbeinu David Kimchi, he says like this. He says, Harisane is miderech haseichel. David HaMelech felt that God opened his eyes, he was able to see things, he understand things. In like a mind's eye. Derech haseichel, in the mind. Shiyodaitim, I knew min haseichel, I understood, I came to a conclusion, logically, cerebrally. And then, nikba'u belibi, then it was established in my heart. I knew what's right. When I knew what's right, I felt my heart was in the right place. V'ritzaini, in my will, and therefore lo sartim hem. Or he says, or maybe, it's azantani b'shmirasam. Hashem somehow guided me. Somehow I had the right attitude. Somehow the right perspective. It's almost like he acknowledges a supra-rational element here. There's rationality, which is in the mind, and then there's a force sometimes even higher. Sometimes you just know something, you don't even know why. It's not just in your heart. It's almost like it's clear to you without really understanding why it's clear. You can't explain it, but this is how you see it to be. And David HaMelech felt that he had a tremendous aid from on high, where Hashem, so to speak, guided him along in being able to see things right. Now, let's go back to the Meiri. So the Meiri says here, he says that this idea of mishpatecha, he says, Maha'amonas hashgachasecha, from belief in your providence. He lived a lot of faith, David HaMelech. Sometimes you see something. So why did I see that for? How come I was shown this thing at this moment? So David HaMelech took that as a lesson. He said, if something was shown to me in a very clear way, and he said, what did I see time and again? I saw how the wicked found retribution brought upon them. And it was as if he says, I saw things ayin ba'ayin, as if I had perfect 20/20 vision in my mind's eye. So we go up from the heart, in verse 101, to the mind, in verse 102. Seeing things clearly. And how does one see things clearly? The seeing things clearly comes specifically from the concept of emunah, of faith. Where is faith? Faith is also in the mind. We call it supra-rational. Like it says in Chassidus, that the reason for faith is because a Yid knows. He knows. He knows intrinsically. Because his neshama is a piece of God, so he knows there's a God. He can't explain it to you. Or because he sees. Now, once again, we're not talking about visual, physical sight. We're talking about in the mind's eye. See it with clarity. So this is the clarity that David HaMelech had. David HaMelech thanked Hashem for the clarity he had, because he said that clarity is what enabled him to be able to make the right decisions and do the right verdict. And here's something really interesting. Our Richiyun says that this is connected to the terminology which is found in the 4th chapter of Deuteronomy, in which it says, Pen Yosuru Milvavcha. Here it says, Loi Sarti, and there it says, Pen Yosuru. What's it talking about there? Moshe Rabbeinu, in Parshas Ve'eschanan, is kind of exhorting the Jewish people. He says, don't forget what you saw. What does he refer to? He says, don't forget what you saw. Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. He says, don't forget what you saw. And don't forget what you saw, says Rambam, on a practical level. Thank you. So he says, don't forget what you saw means keep learning Torah. That's how you have to refresh, so to speak. And he says when a person learns Torah constantly, then this enables him not to turn aside. And the Sefarno specifically says that the deeper meaning of Asharo Einecha, Upen Yosuru Milvavcha, refers to what's seen in the mind's eye, not physical sight. Not physical sight. So David HaMelech had a clarity about him. I once heard that there was a fellow who was learned in Torah, but he didn't learn any Chassidus. And he met the Rebbe's Chayzer, Rabbi Khan, and he said to Rabbi that he has these questions. And Rabbi said to him, do you learn the Rebbe's teachings, the Rebbe's Sichos? And he said, you should learn the Rebbe's Sichos. I will help you with Emunah. Now the Rebbe, in his teachings, explained everything. Things which were not understood, whether in the ways of Chassidus or in general, things which didn't make sense. When you learn the Rebbe's Chassidus, it makes sense. The Rebbe just explained things. He made just logical sense out of many, many, many things. So the fellow came to Rabbi and he said, you told me to learn the Rebbe's Sichos, but it's so logical, he said. I thought I'm getting faith. So the Rabbi said to him, how are things with your faith? He says, it's amazing. I have much stronger faith now. So on one hand, it's rhyme and reason. But Torah, rhyme, and reason does not just talk to your mind. Torah, rhyme, and reason also nourishes a deeper part of you. It nourishes the faith as well. So this is what David HaMelech said, Mi mishpatecha lo sarti. Do you know how I didn't turn off the path of righteousness? Because kiyata ha'yisani, because you taught me. In other words, if you want to stay on the path of righteousness, what should you do? You should learn Torah. The more you learn Torah, the more you'll stay on the path of righteousness. Guarantee. And from the what is good, you can understand the opposite. So therefore, number 1, verse 101 says, avoid toxic situations. Don't tempt yourself. Don't go down a dangerous path. Laman Eshmer. If you will be influenced by what's around you, you will not be able to keep the Torah mitzvahs in the end. There are no gray areas. Surround yourself with that which is illuminated and spiritual and holy and good. And then he says, that's not good enough. Make sure you keep learning Torah. Make sure it's not just about environment. Make sure it's not just about the midah, the way you relate to what's around you. Make sure that you're developing your own persona. And how does one develop their own spiritual persona? This comes through the cerebral activity of studying Torah. So, mishpatecha lo sarti ki ata herisani, because you were constantly teaching me that which is right and good. The Sefarno says, what is the meaning of mishpatecha lo sarti? He says in the Torah there is a clear discussion of what to do when you're in doubt. What do you do? So it says when you're in doubt, Vakam Tov Elisa in Parsha Shoftim, it says that if a person didn't know, then you go to the Sanhedrin. And where did the Sanhedrin sit? In Yerushalayim. And where in Yerushalayim? And where in Beit HaMikdash? And Lishkat HaGaziz, just adjacent to Ezrat Kohanim, where the Korbanot are brought. That's where they are. Why does a place of wisdom and intelligence have to be attached to a place of Korbanot and holiness and spirituality? Because it's not... this is about God. This is about spirituality. And exactly the point. In other words, if you're learning Torah only academically, you miss the point of the Torah. The Torah is not simply a collection of answers, explanations, logic, rhyme, and reason. Torah is not just an intelligent document. The Torah is ultimately a godly document. So what happens when you don't know what to do? Then you go to the Sanhedrin. And he says, the Sefarno says, and that's what it says, Leisaser, Yeminu Smel, don't turn right or left. Rashi says, even if they tell you what's left is right and right is left, in other words, you don't understand it that way. The Emek Dover says that even if you think you are smarter and know how to learn Torah better, if they are the Sanhedrin, then accept it. In other words, sometimes you may learn something in Torah and you may think to yourself, it doesn't make sense to me. You still accept it. Because if it's Torah, then it's Torah. And I have to try to understand it, and I want to understand it, but in order for Mishpatecha Leisarti, he says, then you have to know always there's a Vekamta V'Alisa, that ultimately there's a higher arbiter than our own mind. So, to sum up verse 102 then, in order for us to be able to keep the straight and narrow, in order for us always to have the right focus and perspective, I must keep learning Torah, but not only because Torah will logically and rationally explain to me what's right and wrong, because learning Torah includes in it a spiritual element. And when the spiritual element is there, Hashem opens my eyes. Hashem guides me. It nourishes not only my mind, but also my soul and my faith. So verse 102 and verse 101 together comprise the path to wellness. How do you have wellness? How do you live a life well lived? How do you stay on the path that's good? You have to have healthy emotions. You have to be in a healthy environment. And you have to study Torah. You have to be healthy cerebrally. And when a person engages and immerses himself, puts himself in a healthy place, surrounds himself by good people, you're in a good environment. You don't tempt yourself. You don't put yourself in a situation which is compromising. Then you'll be able to keep Hashem's Torah, and you will not err, and you will not veer off the path, because Atahiri Sani, you're constantly learning Hashem's Torah, you're learning and understanding that which in truth is beyond rhyme and reason and higher than understanding. And that is how David HaMelech teaches us his path of success, the way he was able to achieve this balance of heart and mind in what he did, so that we too can follow a path of spiritual and Jewish wellness, and we too will be able to live lives successfully as did our eternal King David HaMelech. That's 101 and 102.